37-year-old Lina Reyes-Geddes lived in Youngstown, Ohio with her husband Edward Geddes. On April 8, 1998, Lina left her home on a trip from Ohio to Dallas and then to Mexico to visit her family. That would be the last time anyone would see Lina alive. 6 months later, with no sign of Lina since she left their home, Edward reported his wife missing. Investigators found it a bit strange that it took 6 months for Edward to report her missing. He was named a suspect, but investigators couldn't find enough concrete evidence against him. Edward was interviewed by police in October of 1998. During the interview, he claimed his wife had planned to fly from Pittsburgh and dropped her off at the airport. On April 20th, 1998, an unidentified deceased female was located along State Route 276 near Maiden Water Spring in Utah's Garfield County. When investigators arrived, they found a woman in her late 30s to mid-40s, covered with plastic bags, wrapped in duct tape, tied with rope, and placed inside a sleeping bag before being wrapped in a carpet. The woman had been shot. Her hands were cut off, which made identifying her really difficult. Sketches of the woman was shared around, hoping someone would recognize her. Despite an exhaustive investigation by the Garfield County Sheriff's Office and the Utah State Bureau of Investigation, the woman was not identified and the case went cold. Since the woman could not be identified, she became known as the Maiden Water Jane Doe. In 2018, Ohio updated Lina's missing persons file and obtained a picture of her from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Immigration, and Customs Enforcement. A private citizen in California who enjoys researching true crime cases then linked the Maiden Water Jane Doe case to Lina. The internet sleuth noticed the mole in the right ear and told Utah authorities to call Youngstown's police about the missing case involving Lina. Lina's sister traveled from Mexico to offer DNA swabs. Not long after, investigators were able to confirm that the Maiden Water Jane Doe is indeed Lina Reyes-Geddes. The question now was who took Lina's life. They interviewed a lot of people that knew her. They wanted to talk to her husband Edward Geddes, but he had taken his own life back in 2001. Another man police looked into was Scott Kimball. He took the lives of at least 4 people and is suspected in many other cases. Kimball was ultimately ruled out as a suspect. Investigators decided to try and find DNA on the plastic bags, rope, sleeping bag, and other items found at the crime scene. They were able to find DNA belonging to a male on the rope. They wanted to compare Edward's DNA to see if it belonged to him, but he had been cremated so they couldn't exhume him. After family members of his were tracked down, their DNA samples were obtained. Finally, in 2022, it was confirmed that Edward Geddes' DNA matched the DNA of the unknown man found on the rope. Investigators announced at a press conference in June of 2022 that they have enough evidence to say he was the one who took her life and to close the case. While it is frustrating that Edward is not alive anymore to face the charges against him, we at least know he was miserable because he took his own life. Investigators have found no sign that Lina traveled anywhere and believe her trip was a ruse by Edward. They don't know why Edward drove across the country to dispose of his wife's remains or why he decided to take her life. Utah State Bureau of Investigation agent Brian Davis said at the press conference, "There's a lot of ups and downs in law enforcement, but I would put this case at the top of just making you feel good. At least there's some closures. At least there's answers." Davis also mentioned it's not just the DNA that they have as evidence against Edward, but also other circumstantial evidence. Lina's sister Lucero, who had given her DNA to help identify Lina, said, "I felt like for 20 years no one would listen to me, but now I know what happened. I'm here to bring her home, not like I expected, but I'm bringing her back home with me." 54-year-old Nora Sheehan lived in Cork, Ireland. She was a mother of 3. Nora was last seen when she attended a medical appointment for a dog bite at the South Infirmary Hospital on June 6, 1981. When Nora did not return home after her appointment, her family reported her missing. The National Police Service of the Republic of Ireland, or the Gardaí as they are more commonly referred to, started searching for Nora. 6 days later, Nora's body was found by forestry workers at the viewing point in the Chipole Woods. It's about 18 miles from where she was last seen. It was not revealed how her life was taken, but the investigators simply noted that it was violent. Despite the Gardaí investigating the case, they could not identify the person that took her life. In 2016, the Gardaí Serious Crime Review Team reopened the cold case and spent several years examining all details associated with it. In June of 2022, detectives arrested 73-year-old Noel Long at his home in Mauban, Cork, in connection to Nora's case. He was then taken to Bandon Garda Station. A short hearing was held where it seems that Long will take a guilty plea. His attorney Eddie Burke said that his client was a 73-year-old man in receipt of a state pension. Burke also requested that Long will receive all necessary medical treatment while on remand because he has severe medical issues. Detectives have not made it public what exactly led them to Noel Long because it is still an ongoing investigation. Subir Chatterjee lived in Houston, Texas in 2002. He was originally from Sri Lanka. Subir owned and operated the Coastal Gas Station convenience store. On February 15, 2002, around 12:50 p.m., officers with the Oak Ridge North Police Department were dispatched to Subir's store because witnesses heard gunshots. Officers who arrived at the scene found Subir's body in the office area of the gas station. He had been shot in the head. It was also discovered that someone had taken $160,000 in cash from the store. Investigators collected forensic evidence at the crime scene, including DNA that belonged to the person who took Subir's life. The DNA was found under Subir's fingernails. There was also blood from the suspect found. It was stored so it could be used later. At the time, law enforcement had few leads. The witnesses' descriptions were vague, and with no surveillance footage, there were no suspects. The case went cold for almost 20 years. Detective Kent Hubbard, who was the first one to arrive on the scene, persisted in investigating the case. He worked various leads all the time before coming across an article outlining how law enforcement in California used genealogy and DNA to solve cold cases. Hubbard then reached out to Parabon Nanolabs, an organization that uses genetic genealogy, phenotyping, ancestry, and kinship analysis to assist law enforcement in developing potential suspects for cases where DNA evidence is present. With the agreement of the Oak Ridge Police Department and the assistance with the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office, Hubbard requested and received funds to pay for the testing. In 2018, Parabon told Hubbard they identified 3 possible men whose DNA might be a match for the DNA sample found at the crime scene back in 2002. In 2019, investigators followed one of the men to a restaurant. There, they collected his DNA sample from a fork, coffee cup, and a piece of toast. After more DNA testing, on December 4, 2019, it was announced that the DNA from the crime scene matched Martin Isaac Tellez's DNA. On December 10, 2019, Tellez was arrested for the crime. Following the arrest, Tellez confessed to taking Subir's life while robbing him. He explained that his blood was present at the scene because Subir struck him in the head with a telephone to defend himself. While the case was pending, Tellez was out on a $500,000 bail. He cut off his GPS monitoring device and fled to Mexico. Fortunately, agents from Homeland Security and the U.S. Marshals successfully tracked him down and brought him back to the U.S. His trial started in 2022. On June 28th, he pleaded guilty. Tellez was sentenced to 60 years in prison. Assistant District Attorney Donna Hansen said, "Martin Tellez lived more than 20 years of his life with his family and his loved ones around him. Meanwhile, members of the Chatterjee family were left with an empty chair and aching hearts, believing they might never know who was responsible." Detective Kent Hubbard never gave up on this case, and it was my privilege to be able to assist him in bringing justice and closure to Subir's family. Every life taken creates a wound in our community and in the lives of the victim's family. Some of those wounds, like the loss of this beloved father and husband, are very deep. In this case, those wounds were laid bare for decades. District Attorney Brett Ligand said, "Fortunately, a relentless instrument of dogged justice in the form of Detective Hubbard made what was wrong right, and we hope that this measure of accountability will bring some relief to his grieving family."